Are you concerned about weapons getting into the wrong hands?
I don't care at all whether that happens. Of course it's going to happen.
And that's the sentiment of many, many people. We'll start a war with those people down the road. I stand with the people that are being harmed by this war. And by that, I mean the Ukrainian people and the Russian people. Zelensky, Putin, the oligarchs can all go themselves. Every single one of them. I don't appreciate what Ukraine was doing with shelling the Donbass since 2014 after the coup. I don't appreciate what America's been doing with Ukraine and crossing red lines with arrogance and hubris against a nuclear superpower. I don't appreciate the way that Putin has handled this and the way that it's gone down as far as what's happened to civilians. I also don't love that it seems like they got real, they did a lot, like they took a page out of Hamas's book in Palestine and set up their military operations in civilian areas. I'm not a fan of Israel either. I'm also not a fan of Hamas. All of these things can exist at one time. What I stand for is the people, the working class, real people, the citizens that don't deserve this happening to them. I've had to clarify this numerous times, and I'm going to do it again because Ukraine right now is my focus because that's where I see the most bullshit. Everyone knows Putin is a dictator. Everyone knows Putin is a bully. Okay, I don't think he's virtuous. I don't think he's in the right. I don't know enough. No one knows enough that's not there, whether or not this is justified or not. And I know it's like, well, clearly it's not justified. Yeah, wars happen all the time, man. When have we not been at war since we've all been alive that are listening to this? Somebody. The United States, for most of my life, I think pretty much all of it, like 98% of my life, the United States has been at war with somebody. And then on top of that, we back Saudi Arabia and Yemen. We don't really hold Israel accountable for what they do with Palestinian civilians, but somehow we can find a justification for those things. So I'm using that very loose term justification here as well. It's a principled stance. So when I look at that, I'm like, well, I mean, I have to measure it against the world at the time, right? You look at things like Genghis Khan, who somehow found a way to behead over 1 million people with swords, right? And people just lined up and would knock out whole cities. That was the game they were playing at the time. Alexander the Great, that's the game they were playing at the time. You have to judge them by what the game was at the time. But the game at that time was rape, pillage, and conquer. And we have to do that. We have to put it in context. So in context right now, as far as justified wars are concerned, I don't know. And that's an honest way of going about it. But what I can say is this looks really sketchy. And when I criticize Ukraine, I'm criticizing the United States because they're the ones enabling this behavior. CBS, of all outlets, actually did some journalism. It says why military aid is not getting to the front lines in Ukraine. Now, they had to add an editor's note. It says this article has been updated to reflect changes since the CBS Reports documentary Arming Ukraine was filmed. And the documentary is also being updated. Jonas Omas said the delivery was significantly improved since filming with CBS in late April. The government of Ukraine notes that U.S. Defense Attaché Brigadier General Jarek Harman arrived in Kiev in August 2022 for arms control and monitoring. Okay, yeah, but this is filmed when a lot of the crazy shit was going on. So it still matters. When all the weapons were showing up, this was being filmed, and that matters a lot. It doesn't, now maybe it's gotten better since then, but that doesn't mean that there's not billions of dollars of weapons, and apparently only 30% of those are making it to the front lines, or were at the time. That's still a lot of weapons. That's still very valid. So I found this, they took the documentary down. It was on that page. I was able to go find it. Somebody had put it on YouTube and on Rumble. I shared the link in the Patreon so people could check it out, hoping that it would stay up. But let's just watch a few segments of this. A couple things that I wanted to point out. So here's kind of the beginning, which is almost like kind of gives a framework for what this is.
We move weapons and equipment to Ukraine at record speed. Drones, grenade launchers, machine guns.
We're seeing this incredible, historic flow of weapons coming into Ukraine. Do we have any sense as to where they're going?
We don't know. There is really no information as to where they're going at all.
All this stuff goes to the border, and then kind of like something happens, it kind of like 30% maybe reaches its final destination.
30%. 30% reaches its final destination.
3%? Are you concerned about weapons getting into the wrong hands?
I don't care at all whether that happens.
What sort of a unit do you command? Can't say. Okay.
There are like power lords, oligarchs, political players.
One of the biggest targets are convoys like this transporting weapons.
Europeans had come to believe that project of integration had effectively meant the banishment of armed force. All of a sudden, not far from the borders of the EU, was the most significant war since World War II.
There's a lot there. There's a couple of things I wanted to point out and kind of expand on. So you can see this is like the real deal. Like these guys were getting shot at. There was shelling like happening right behind them. It's crazy. I mean, this is a lot. It takes a lot to do a documentary like this. It takes a lot.
The derailing of this supply run is one of the many ways desperately needed aid doesn't always make it to the soldiers who need it. The U.S. has sent tens of thousands of anti-aircraft and anti-armor systems, artillery rounds, hundreds of artillery systems, switchblade armored drones, and tens of millions of rounds of small arms ammunition. But in a conflict where front lines are scattered and conditions change without warning, not all of those supplies reach their destination. Some also reported weapons are being hoarded, or worse, fear that they are disappearing into the black market, an industry that has thrived under corruption in post-Soviet Ukraine.
So my question there is like, okay, so we're not supposed to care about this, right? We're not allowed to talk about this. How many degrees of separation is it from some corrupt person within the Ukrainian government to get a handful of Hellfire missiles or whatever to the kind of person who would sell those to some kind of terrorist who might attack the United States, Europe, whatever? While we pretend that we're making Europe safer, and somebody even said that in response to one of my videos, like European safety is American safety. It's like, well, we're not making Europe safer. We're actually flooding the area, flooding the whole zone with advanced weaponry that only takes one or two people with the right intention and the right mindset and the greed to get a handful of incredibly destructive weapons to the wrong kind of people. You know what I'm saying? That would actually do something cut nuts. Shoot a jetliner out of the air, blow up a building. So let's have a real rational head on our shoulders when we're thinking about the kinds of weapons we're sending to a place that, let's be honest, has a Nazi problem. Okay? Can we be honest about it? Can we be grown-ups about it? And Zelensky thinks he's just above criticism, and that anything that he can't stand for criticism, and it's all Russian propaganda. That sounds like an authoritarian to me. That sounds quite authoritarian to me, and it sounds a lot like exactly what we're fighting against, doesn't it? Which sounds very similar to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and the way that we funded them. Now, this military contractor this is a trip. We're going to play this whole little segment here.
If you provide supplies or logistics pipeline, you've got to be able, there's got to be some organization to it, right? You know, the surprise isn't that, oh, all this stuff isn't getting there. The surprise is that people actually expected it to.
We're here in the evacuation.
Andy Milburn is a U.S. Marine veteran. Unsatisfied with what he felt was a too hands-off approach from the U.S., he made his way to Kyiv after the invasion to train frontline soldiers.
I can tell you unarguably that on the frontline units, these things are not getting there, all right? Drones, switchblades, IFACs, they're not, all right? Body armor, helmets, you name it.
Is it safe to characterize this as a little bit of a black hole?
I suppose if you don't have visibility of where this stuff is going, and if you're asking that question, then it would appear that it's a black hole, yeah.
Are you concerned about weapons getting into the wrong hands?
I don't care at all whether that happens. Of course it's going to happen. It happens in any... I mean, if you don't have guys here supervising the pipeline, but that's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern right now is that the guys who need to kill Russians with those weapons get those weapons.
And that's the sentiment of many, many people. I don't really give a shit if that happens. We'll start a war with those people down the road. Crazy, man. Absolutely crazy. Then we've got this here. Amnesty International assessment that Ukraine put civilians in harm's way stirs outrage. A human rights group accused the Ukrainian military of establishing bases and weapon systems in schools and hospitals. Amnesty International is now a pro-Putin. The international organization that calls war crimes must be working for Putin now. Does it seem that way to you? So what it seems like to me is that you put bases and weapons in schools and hospitals and then got upset, and a mall, by the way. I saw that video of you putting weapon systems in a mall that was actually functioning. Didn't tell anybody that, and then it got blown up and you're like, oh my God, look at all these civilian deaths. Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens when you don't give a about your civilians. Can you imagine the United States government putting a weapon system inside of the Dallas Cowboys stadium and then being surprised when it gets blown up? Like, what have we, you're in an active war zone, dude. Take some responsibility. I mean, all I'm asking for is for a person who we're sending billions and billions and billions of dollars in weapons to be held accountable. I'm doing the same thing Rand Paul was doing and asking for at least some oversight. Just like that military contractor war criminal guy just said. It's like, if you have people supervising the pipeline, that won't happen. Why are people not there supervising the pipeline? This is going to come back and bite us in the ass so bad, and nobody will listen. It'll be the same shit. This is just, it's like we've seen this enough times that we know this smells fishy. and we just don't do a goddamn thing about it. Here's the deal, Jack. YouTube hates us. They hate us. We're being persecuted against. I don't want to say it's because of my race, but we can make some assumptions. You know what I'm talking about? And one thing you can do to really help this channel out is subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, turn on post notifications, and leave a comment on this video. Okay? Overcome the hatred. Be the change you want to see in the world. Live, laugh, love. Subscribe to the fucking YouTube channel.